Ever get that feeling? Like there's this invisible wall between you and, the people you're closest to. You want to connect, really connect, but something just isn't clicking.
It's a strange thing, isn't it? In a world overflowing with ways to reach out, real intimacy, that genuine understanding, it feels, well, harder than ever to find.
Right. And that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Yeah.
This gap between our inner worlds, how we can bridge it,
Yeah.
especially in this day and age.
Oh, absolutely. It's a conversation that's more relevant now than ever, I think.
100%. And I think you'll find this blogger, KindredSoul, super relatable. He's been exploring this whole thing on his blog, Kindred Soul Search. And let me tell you, some of his insights are seriously thought-provoking.
Oh,
So he talks about this feeling of drifting apart from his wife. And it's not like they're fighting or anything. They're together, but it's like something's just off.
I've heard that from so many couples, that sense of being physically present but emotionally distant.
Exactly. And it gets even more interesting because he describes this gap, this disconnect, as a thinnest membrane, this barrier between what's going on in his head and what he actually shares.
It's almost like we build up these elaborate inner worlds full of thoughts and dreams and anxieties, and then we hit this wall when it comes to expressing them, even to the people closest to us.
Totally. It's like, I want to let you in, but it's like this invisible shield goes up.
Exactly. And the irony is, this is all happening in the age of constant communication.
Right. It's like we can tweet our every thought and share vacation pics in real time, but that deep, meaningful connection, that still feels elusive. Kindred Soul actually calls it a paradox. We're more connected than ever, yet we often feel most alone with the people we're supposed to be closest to.
It really makes you think about what we're prioritizing, doesn't it? Are we really connecting, or are we just going through the motions?
That's the question, isn't it? And if it's not just about sending another text or posting a cute selfie, then what is the key to bridging this gap?
Well, one thing Kindred Soul points out that really resonated with me is this idea that just because we miscommunicate, it doesn't automatically mean there's a lack of love.
That's a good point. We tend to assume the worst, right? Like they're not listening or they don't care. But what if it's not that simple?
Exactly. What if it's just that we're looking at the situation through different lenses, shaped by our own unique experiences and perspectives?
It's like we're both speaking English, but with slightly different dictionaries.
Exactly. And instead of trying to decipher each other's language, we jump to conclusions, assume the worst, and the disconnect just grows wider.
And that makes it even harder to bridge the gap?
Yeah.
Like if we already assume the other person isn't listening or doesn't care, why even bother trying to communicate in the first place?
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So how do we break out of that cycle? How do we start seeing those miscommunications not as signs of a failing relationship, but as opportunities for growth and deeper understanding?
Well, that's something Kindred Soul explores in his blog as well. And I think his insights are incredibly valuable, both for navigating our own relationships and for understanding the larger human experience. So how do we break out of that cycle? Where do we even begin to bridge that gap?
Well, Kindred Soul, in his blog, he seems to be asking himself the same questions. And one thing he keeps coming back to is this idea of perspective, like really trying to see things from the other person's point of view.
Which makes sense, right? If we're both approaching the situation with completely different backgrounds, different experiences.
Exactly. It's like we're both looking at the same painting, but we're standing in different parts of the room. Our interpretations are going to be different, and that's okay.
But how do we even begin to understand someone else's perspective when we're so stuck in our own heads?
Right. It's not easy. But one thing Kindred Soul talks about is this idea of like actively trying to understand the other person's lens, the unique way they see the world based on their own experiences, their own baggage.
Their own baggage, yeah.
Right.
Because we all have it, right? Those past hurts, those insecurities that shape how we react to things, how we interpret what people say and do.
Exactly. And if we can start to recognize that, both in ourselves and in our partners, it can make a huge difference.
So it's not just about listening to what they're saying, but trying to understand the why behind it.
Exactly. It's about asking ourselves, okay, what's going on in their world that might be making them react this way? What's their lens in this situation?
That's such a good way to put it. It's like instead of getting defensive or taking things personally, we take a step back and try to see the bigger picture.
Right. And it's not about saying that their reaction is right or wrong or that your feelings aren't valid. It's about creating space for understanding.
Which ultimately brings us closer together, right? Because even though those conversations can be tough, even uncomfortable sometimes, they can also lead to a much deeper level of intimacy.
Exactly. And isn't that what we all want? To feel truly seen and understood by the people we love.
100%. But it's funny because we're having this whole conversation about connection, but it seems like technology, which is supposed to be connecting us, is often part of the problem.
Oh, absolutely. It's that double-edged sword we were talking about earlier.
Like, on one hand, we have access to more information, more perspectives than ever before.
Which is amazing. Think about it. You can connect with someone on the other side of the world, share your story, hear theirs.
It is incredible. But then there's that other side of it. The way technology can also make us feel more alone, more isolated, even when we're surrounded by people.
It's like we're constantly bombarded with images of other people's seemingly perfect lives, their perfectly filtered photos, their witty comments.
And it's easy to start comparing ourselves, feeling like we don't measure up.
Exactly. And suddenly we're so busy curating our own online personas, trying to present this perfect image to the world, that we forget how to just be ourselves, imperfections and all.
And that's where real connection happens, isn't it?
Hmm.
Not in those perfectly crafted online interactions, but in the messy, vulnerable, in-person moments.
Absolutely. And that's something Kindred Soul really grapples with in his blog. He's yearning for that deep, meaningful connection with his wife, but they're both so plugged into their devices, so caught up in their online worlds, that it's almost like they've forgotten how to truly be present with each other.
And that brings us to this really powerful image that Kindred Soul uses to describe his relationship with his wife.
Yeah.
He talks about her being the person he's chosen to, and get this, walk hand in hand towards death with.
It's a bit morbid, isn't it? But also strangely profound.
Right. It's like, on the surface, it seems kind of dark, maybe even a little bit depressing. But when you really think about it, it speaks to a deep level of commitment, of acceptance. It's like he's saying, yeah, life is finite. We're all going to face death eventually, but I'm choosing to face it with you by my side.
It's a powerful statement, isn't it? And it speaks to that deep vulnerability we were talking about earlier. Because when you choose to share your life with someone, you're also choosing to be completely open and exposed with them.
And that's terrifying, right? To let someone see all of you, flaws and all, knowing they could hurt you, disappoint you.
Absolutely. But it's also in those moments of vulnerability, those moments of raw, unfiltered honesty, that true intimacy is born.
It's like, I'm willing to risk being hurt because the connection, the love we share, it's worth it.
Exactly. And I think that's what Kindred Soul is getting at with this whole walking towards death analogy. It's not about being morbid or dwelling on the negative. It's about recognizing the depth of that commitment, that willingness to face life's biggest challenges together.
And it's interesting because even though his commenter, Clouded Sky, initially questioned that whole image, they end up leaving Kindred Soul with this really thought-provoking statement. They say, where there is smoke, there must be fire.
Ooh, I like that. What do you think they meant by that?
Well, to me, it's like a call to action. Like, yeah, maybe things aren't perfect in our relationships. Maybe there are these little things, these little sparks of disconnect that we try to ignore.
But those little sparks, if we're not careful, they can turn into something much bigger.
Exactly. So it's about paying attention to those signs, those early warning signals, and addressing them before they become major issues.
Because connection, it's not a one-time achievement, right? It's an ongoing process. It's about showing up every day, being present, and choosing to nurture that connection, to keep those flames burning bright.
It makes you think about all those little moments, those little interactions that we might take for granted. A shared smile, a listening ear, a hand to hold. Those are the building blocks of a strong and lasting connection.
Absolutely. And it's in those moments, those seemingly insignificant gestures, that we truly show up for each other, that we bridge that gap between our inner worlds and create something truly special.
It's a beautiful thought, isn't it?
Uh,
And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the complexities of love, connection, and the boundless inner world.
it's been a fascinating
It
conversation.
really has.
Yeah.
And we hope it's given you some food for thought, some new insights into your own relationships and the ways we connect as human beings.
Because at the end of the day, we all crave that feeling of belonging, of being seen and understood for who we truly are.
We do. And the more we understand about ourselves, about our partners, and about the ways we communicate, the more fulfilling those connections can be. So keep those conversations flowing, keep exploring those depths within yourselves and your relationships, and remember, you're not alone on this journey.
We've given you the starting point, the first clue in this intriguing mystery. Now it's your turn to take the reins. Head over to kindredsoulsearch.com and see what you uncover. What could Kindred Soul Search mean to you? Maybe jot down your thoughts, your impressions. Consider this deep dive your launch pad, the first step on a journey of discovery.